Welcome everyone to the Kent City Council Committee of the Whole special meeting. Today is Tuesday, December 1st, 2020. This is a remote meeting due to the COVID-19 health and safety requirements by the governor. So welcome to anyone that is joining us today on Kent TV 21, the City of Kent Facebook page, the YouTube Kent TV 21 channel, or anyone that is called in to listen to the meeting. With that, let's get started on the agenda. Kim, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Council President. Council President Troutner?
Here.
Councilmember Boyce?
Here.
Councilmember Fincher?
Here.
Councilmember Kaur?
Here.
Councilmember Larmer?
Here.
Councilmember Michaud?
Here.
Councilmember Thomas?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kim. Are there any changes to the agenda from councilor staff?
None from staff this afternoon.
All right, seeing none, we have quite a few presentations. So let's go ahead and get started. The first presentation is the Kent Correctional Facility Pharmacy Services Contract.
Hi, this is Diane McCuistion. I'm the jail commander. Happy to be here tonight. So I have two things that I'm here to talk about. The pharmaceutical contract is for our inmate medications. We are entering into a contract with Omnicare, which is a national company. They're associated with CVS Pharmacy. This is a portion of our inmate medical services contract. So we'll be getting our inmate medications from Omnicare. They will invoice us as we order the medication. So we're really just purchasing product for them rather than a service. It's a 1-year contract. We have never held our own pharmaceutical contract. That was done with Valley Medical in the past. So this is new. We thought we would be conservative on it and enter into a 1-year just to test the waters a little bit. We did do competitive pricing with 4 other pharmaceutical companies before we chose Omnicare, and Omnicare came out most competitive on it. So that is our pharmaceutical contract. The second one is for inmate food services. We've been with Summit Foods for over 30 years. We're their longest standing customer. We've been satisfied with their services. It's due to expire at the end of this year. So we went ahead and entered into a new contract with them. They offer inmate meals that provide a 2,600 calorie a day nutritional meal for inmates. They also provide religious meals and any kind of special diets that are needed. They have a 7 days of emergency foods on hand as well. So in case of an emergency, we can be self-sustained for 7 days. We sent in a revision for tonight's meeting. I'm not sure if you got it or not. It was a little late to get into the agenda packet from what I understand. So the few things that were changed on that was food pricing scale. So that will be a little bit different. And you'll get a corrected version that'll appear on the consent calendar next week. And that's all I have on the food services. Are there any questions at all?
All right, are there any questions about either of these?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. Hey, Diana, when I look at the motion, there's no dollar associated with this here. Is my first question. And I'm wondering, so this is a new contract, and we do have other city who use our jail. So does that impact their contract with us, or that's all under consideration already?
Are you speaking for the food services?
Well, I'm talking about both the pharmaceutical as well as the food service.
Both of those pieces are part of our, are just built into the contract. It's services that are added in for our contracting agencies. So neither of those will have an impact. purchasing medications is something that we've already been doing for some time. It'll be just a different vendor that we're purchasing them from. And the food service contract, I'm actually pretty pleased with how that ended up. It was it'll over the total 5-year duration, it'll just be a 2% increase, 1% in year 2 and 1% in year 3. So really, if you looked at CPI and things like that, I think we negotiated it quite aggressively.
I was just curious, like in the motion, there's not a dollar value in the motion, just kind of authorize the mayor, which is okay. Typical when we see these
Oh,
dollar value in the motion, and I don't see that.
okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that part of it. Our food services is $472,000 annually. And pharmaceutical, because it hasn't been a contract, I pulled up what we paid in the past, and it's about $82,000 to $88,000.
Okay. Derek, would that be something that would be in the motion once we do it, or?
So I believe the intent here is for this to be a unit price contract. So because it's coming to council, the council doesn't have to set a cap on it. And then the contract itself provides that brand drugs are at acquisition cost plus 1%, and generic drugs are the unit cost is the wholesale price minus 80%.
Okay. I don't mean to beat this to death. I'm just curious, what was our cost for pharmaceutical last year? Do we know what that type of cost was?
$82,000.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
And I think that the motion for the food services does have the amount in that one.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any other questions on this? Okay, and I think everyone heard that in the packet for Tuesday, it will have that updated information for the food services. So is everyone okay with moving both of these onto the consent calendar? Seeing a few thumbs up. All right. Wonderful. We will move that on to the consent calendar then. Both of those items, A and B. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we are going to move on to item number C, which is the West Hill Reservoir right-of-way dedication and correction ordinance, which also requires action.
Hello, this is Drew Holcomb. I'm with Public Works Design, and I'm here today to talk to you about a correction needed for a right-of-way ordinance. Kim, if you could go to the next slide, please. Again, I talked with you last month, I believe, about dedicating right-of-way and an easement in order to facilitate the undergrounding of power across the West Hill Reservoir site. Next slide, please. And this just shows what we're doing there, completing the underground. We found an error in the legal description. The drawing for the legal description includes a drawn portion and then a text portion. And there was an error in the text portion, so we're coming back to you to have you sign the latest, which will correct this error. It doesn't change anything from what we last talked about. So that's all I have for you guys today. Does anyone have any questions?
Anybody have any questions? I know we've seen this before, so. All right, and this is to adopt the ordinance and move it forward to the consent calendar. Is everyone okay moving that forward? All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Drew.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are going to welcome Rob Brown. I'm always looking forward to this update because this is something that I promised Councilmember Higgins that I would keep track of. And so let's have some information on the quiet zone.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, Council President Troutner, members of the City Council. My name is Rob Brown. I'm the Transportation Engineering Manager for the Public Works Department. And I am going to give you an update on the quiet zone. Next slide, please, Kim. Thank you. So this is just a quick overview of the process to establish quiet zones. You've seen this before. It starts with the train horn rule that was established by federal law. We've talked previously about the different methods to establish the quiet zone. And we've gotten to the point, which I believe I mentioned in the August update, that we've received the approval from the Federal Railroad Administration to establish a quiet zone on the BNSF Railroad. and we meet the criteria to establish a quiet zone on the Union Pacific Railroad. And so now we need to work on the crossing modifications. And the Washington State Utilities and Transportation Commission, or UTC, approves all of the crossing modifications for railroads in the state. And so they have to approve our crossing modifications. So when we submit what's called a petition to the UTC for them to consider our crossing modifications, those then go to, well, can you go back, please, Ken? All right, thanks. Anyway, those then go to the, consider the railroads are considered and are part of that process. Once that is approved, then we develop our construction contract documents. We have our construction project. There's the formal process to establish the quiet zone, and then finally we have the ongoing maintenance to maintain the quiet zone for the life of it. Next slide, please. Thank you, Kim. So where we are now is we are in the process of working on our crossing modification petitions. The petitions are mostly done, but the issue is we can submit them without the railroad's approval or concurrence. But that would lead us into an administrative hearing with the Utilities and Transportation Commission, and they told us that that's a 12 to 15-month process. And it's in our best interest, and it's also being good neighbors with the railroads to work with them on our crossing modification proposals to try and reach an agreement, at which point, if we can reach an agreement, they can sign a waiver, which then goes to the UTC as part of our petition submittal, which shortens our time, removes the hearing, and shortens our approval time to about 2 months. And so that's where we are right now. We're still working with the railroads. Unfortunately, we're working on a railroad schedule and railroad time, but I do have good news. Since the last update in August, we now have contract documents from both of the railroads for engineering services for them to work with us on those crossings to try and reach some consensus. And so those have been through our law department for review, and those should be approved shortly. So again, following that, I am fairly confident after talking with representatives of both the railroads that we looks like we should be able to come to an agreement, reach a consensus on what those crossing modifications look like. Again, following that, we have our construction contract documents, our construction project, our formal notice of establishment document, and then our maintenance of the crossings. So next slide, please, Kim. So thank you. So this is the current updated schedule. I showed a version of this in the August updates. The new line is at the top. This is contracting with the railroads to work with us so they can have their engineering departments work with us on coming to an agreement on those crossing modifications. I did put in some extra time in the second line, which is the coordination with the railroads. Again, we're working with the railroads. We don't really have any control over their schedule, so we're working their schedule. So I've put some extra time in there because it is a process of the railroads. Both of them are out of state. Their headquarters are in the Midwest, both Union Pacific and BNSF. And then we've got the Utilities and Transportation Commission time. That time hasn't changed. 2 to 3 months if we can reach agreement with the railroads, up to 15 months if we can't. And then our construction documents, construction time frame, the formal notice of establishment of the quiet zones, and then the quiet zone establishments. And so those are, that is the current updated schedule. So that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have questions for Rob? All right, Rob, I really appreciate you.
Actually,
I'm
sorry, Council President. Sorry, I couldn't get my little hand icon up fast enough. So, Rob, on this calendar, what are we looking at? Are we looking at more? Are we looking at the green path or the gold path, or what are we still tracking with this recent milestone?
So what we're looking at the schedule. So the green bars are probably our best case scenario if everything goes perfectly and goes our way. That is probably our best case time frame. The gold bars are more of a realistic time frame.
Okay, so do you feel like we're still looking at July 2023?
I'm hoping it's somewhere closer, but again, you know, the last couple items, working with the UTC, and certainly the contracting and the notice of establishment, those I'm fairly comfortable with. The notice of establishment's, it's set at 60 days, so that one's a given. Contracting side, I think we can come closer to the 8 months than the 12 months. It's just going to depend on when we get the approval and if our contract goes out, late in the year. Weather window, it's a lot harder to do construction, especially with pavement markings and things in the wintertime and the summertime. But as far as the Utilities and Transportation Commission, I am really hopeful and confident that we'll be able to work with the railroads and reduce that time from a 15-month hearing down to a 3-month administrative approval with the concurrence of the railroads. So that's where we're taking this extra step now, the contracting with the railroads and working with the railroads to try and reduce or trying to eliminate that possibility of a hearing.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that.
Councilmember Fincher, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Council President. So Rob, my question was about that hearing. So if they signed the waiver, does that guarantee that we're not going to have to go the long route, or could the board still come back and give us additional things that we have to do or that the railroad has to do?
That is a great question. So if the railroads sign the waiver, that takes us out of the hearing. So the hearing is only if the railroads don't agree to our crossing modifications. So the Utilities and Transportation Commission can still impose additional or change the modifications that we're proposing at the crossings, even if we agree with the railroad, because they have the final say in those crossings. So they could ask us to do something different than what we come to an agreement with the railroad with, but we will not have the hearing if we can get them to sign those waivers.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Rob? All right. Thanks so much, Rob. I look forward to hearing where we are the next time you give us a report.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have information only, the Transportation Master Plan draft policies and actions.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me tonight so I can introduce you to the draft Transportation Master Plan policies and actions. Next slide, please, Kim. First, I want to step back and orient you on how the policies and actions fit with the prioritized projects. The Transportation Master Plan is Kent's transportation vision for the next 20 years. This vision was crafted through extensive public outreach and interdepartmental coordination and can be seen in the prioritized project list as well as in the policies and actions. There has been astounding movement on the TMP over the last year since the goals were adopted. These two elements of the TMP are a critical part of the roadmap for reaching the adopted goals. Plan performance measures will measure progress on the prioritized projects and on the policies and actions and provide a measuring stick to understand progress on those goals. Next slide, please. The policies and actions provide direction and guidance, while the actions detail the next steps. Both policies and actions will facilitate a variety of efforts. These efforts include grant applications for projects on the prioritized project list, process updates to improve the flow to the 6-year Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, data collection and analysis to facilitate grant applications and to support partnerships, and external and an internal collaboration on projects and processes. Next slide, please. The connectivity and options goal emphasizes the need for an equitable multimodal transportation network. Next slide, please. The connectivity and options policies provide direction on how to reach a multimodal transportation network. Some of these policies reference our complete streets process and ordinance, and other ones direct us to do programs and processes and how to make them equitable. Next slide, please. While the connectivity and options actions provide the next steps. Some of those preliminary ideas include how to develop an outreach process for project development, and some of the things that we've been talking about internally include things like facilitate outreach and engagement in places where communities already gather, identify opportunities for education around the relationship between transportation and economy, environment, and health, as well as strategies for preventing and managing conflict, collaborating with cultural organizations, social service entities, faith-based organizations, and other community organizations to develop effective outreach and engagement strategies, and many other ones that we'll be talking about over the coming year. Next slide, please. The safety and health goal is focused on improving health by improving safety and access to non-motorized modes in transit. Next slide. The safety and health policies provide direction in multiple areas, including things like traffic calming, the safety program, and equity opportunities, and how to embed them in process and projects. Next slide, please. The next steps to start progressing towards a goal focus on process improvements and how to implement programs like the Safe Routes to School program, which is on the funded list, the safety program, which is also a program on the prioritized project list. Next slide. The stewardship goal focuses on maintaining the transportation system that's already built and purposely investing in new transportation projects. Next slide. Policies in this area focus on maintenance and preservation, economic development, especially in transit-rich areas, as well as environmental impacts. Next slide. Actions focus on facilitating maintenance and preservation by tracking need and as well as seeking investments. Placemaking is focused on the nexus between transportation and land use. Next slide. The policies focus on urban design, particularly how people interact with streets and streetscapes, and on incorporating the needs of bicyclists, pedestrians, and transit riders in those streetscapes. Next slide. The actions focus on how we can do better to incorporate land use and transportation, as well as how we can embed it into decision-making. Next slide. Strategy is focused on pursuing funding, leveraging partnerships, and maximizing the efficiency of the existing transportation network. Next slide. Policies in this area include support for additional funding, the fair allocation of existing funding, and emphasis on equity and outreach in project delivery. Next slide. Actions include steps on improving quality of life via small-scale projects, embedding equity in project delivery, and above all, improving processes. Next slide, please. The draft policies and actions have been presented to the Cultural Communities Board and the Kent Bicycle Advisory Board, as well as shared with the Transportation Advisory Board. Staff have requested comments from board members. Any comments received will be reviewed and the policies and actions updated based on that feedback. Staff anticipate any feedbacks being complete by Friday. Both the prioritized projects and policies and actions flow to the last element of the TMP, the planned performance measures. There will be a future presentation to Council on these potential measures. And I will take any questions.
Any questions from Council members? Councilmember Corr.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Yep. Then we'll go to Councilmember Boyce. Councilmember Corr, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you, April. I don't have a question. I wanted to comment on, I also heard you on the Culture Communities Board last week, and I'm just amazed by the amount of outreach you have done. So thank you so much for trying to reach out to all communities in Kent and all the work you have done with the outreach. I just wanted to commend you on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Boyce.
Councilman McCoy beat me to the punch, but I just wanted to ditto what she just said. I mean, your team has done a phenomenal job really reaching out. I think you brought this to us many times, and I think we kept bringing up, making sure you're reaching out. And I've just been totally impressed with the work that you and your team have done. So I just want to compliment you and your team, and please pass it on. Keep up the good work. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very well said, both Councilmember Corr and Councilmember Boyce. April, you always do a great job with these presentations so that we can understand what you're sharing with us. But what's most important is that you are out there gathering information from the community, and you can see it here in some of these things that we're choosing to make a part of this plan. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. If there's nothing else, thank you, April. We will move on in our agenda. And I believe you're up with the project list.
I am. So this is a quick follow-up update from the presentation on November 10th. I wanted to give you an update on the project list, particularly the funded project list, as well as the capital project budget. Next slide, please. But first, I want to go over the outreach efforts on the project list and highlight some of the outreach that has happened over the last 3 weeks. Next slide, please. Outreach has been a critical element at multiple points of project development. In fall 2019, extensive outreach for the public, boards, and community groups focused on requesting project ideas for the plan. In early 2020, outreach focused on seeking comments from the Transportation Advisory Board on the performance measures that were used to prioritize projects. In August and September of this year, outreach was the focus for public, boards, and community groups, and we requested feedback on the projects that were prioritized by those performance measures. And lastly, outreach to the public and city boards in the last 3 weeks have focused on the public outreach we received and explaining how it integrates with the prioritized project list. Next slide. Efforts targeting the public, including social media and the TMP website. Social media posted included boosted posts that reached over 15,000 individuals that indicated they lived in the city of Kent. Between November 12th and November 30th, the website had 620 visitors with 600 unique visitors. Presentations were also made to the Transportation Advisory Board, Culture Communities Board, and the Kent Bicycle Advisory Board that detailed the public outreach received, how the feedback was incorporated in the project list, and the prioritized project list. Next slide. Some of the things we heard: feedback received via social media posts and from boards during presentation. Feedback was really focused on the projects, the process, and the implementation of the TMP, and many comments referencing looking forward to as we start building some of these projects. Next slide, please. Before I jump into discussing the funded project list, I wanted to step back and go over and give some more details on the Transportation Master Plan capital project budget. Next slide. The TMP capital budget is projected to be $254 million and consists of 4 existing funding sources. The capital budget forecast is based on historical data as well as ongoing trends. Over the next 20 years, $70 million is anticipated from the B&O tax, $80 million from grants and appropriations, $74 million from the transportation impact fees, and $30 million from local improvement districts. Next slide. Compared to historical funding, forecast B&O is anticipated to be slightly decreased. Forecasted grants and appropriations are anticipated to be relatively steady, and both transportation impact fees and local improvement districts are anticipated to increase some. Next slide, please. The capital budget is the funding source for a portion of the funded transportation projects, which include the prioritized projects, projects with secured funding, and developer projects. These projects are anticipated to be constructed over the 20-year planning horizon of the TMP. Next slide, please. Projects with secure funding are projects with already secured funding. Many of these projects are already under design and even construction. Developer projects are projects that are anticipated to be constructed by private developers or other public agencies. And the prioritized projects are those that are anticipated to be funded by that capital budget that I just described. Next slide, please. There have been a couple of changes to the funded projects. 3 projects and a portion of an additional 3 projects have been awarded Highway Safety Improvement Program or HSIP funding. So these projects have been moved to the secured funding list. Staff will be bringing more information to the Committee of the Whole on these projects very soon. Next slide, please. 6 projects on the prioritized project list were submitted for the WashDOT Bicycle and Pedestrian Program grant competition. Staff anticipate hearing if these projects were successful this month. It was actually supposed to come out today, and it has not posted on the website yet, so I don't have an update. Next slide, please. Lastly, 5 new projects were added to the developer list. The projects are the non-motorized projects proposed by Metro for the Rapid Ride I project. Next slide, please. The total cost of the projects in the prioritized project list equals to the forecast capital project budget, meaning the TNP is financially constrained. This is a requirement of the Growth Management Act, or GMA. GMA requires the TNP include a multi-year financing plan where the proposed projects are sufficiently funded by the forecast revenue. Next slide, please.
Madam President, can we back up one slide? I'm sorry, before we go too far.
Sure.
Well, back up one slide, please. So 240, 256, 240. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
The secured projects total about $15.4 million, and the developer projects total about $29.65 million. Combined, the funded projects are just over $299 million. Next slide. There are projects in each on the list throughout the city, as well as a few projects that are citywide. Next slide, please. Ensuring that projects were dispersed throughout the city and each sub-area was a key objective throughout the project development, including the final step in determining the funded projects. Next slide, please. The project list is truly multimodal, with projects that serve bicyclists, pedestrians, vehicles, and some that even serve all three modes. Next slide. In addition, the funded projects include roadway maintenance projects, projects that ensure the existing roadways operate as efficiently as possible, and safety projects. Next slide, please. In addition, there are projects on 2 program project lists and on an unfunded project list. Next slide, please. Staff anticipate both programs being developed soon with additional projects identified. These projects will then be prioritized for funding by the program that is on the prioritized project list. Next slide, please. The unfunded project list was developed to ensure the projects developed during the extensive public outreach process remain on the city's radar. If additional funding is identified from new sources or as a result of higher than forecasted funding, these projects will then be considered. Next slide, please. Staff are furiously working on finalizing the text for the TMP document. The projects and capital project budget are the final 2 chapters of the TMP. Staff will be coordinating with the city's communication and multimedia team over the next month to develop and finalize the document for your review in January. And I will take any questions.
Another great presentation. Questions for April? All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised. April, I'm glad to see that list of unfunded projects, because I know we've had some questions from people in the community that have asked about certain areas and sidewalks. And it's comforting to let them know that we haven't completely taken those off of any project list, that they're still there and waiting if something comes along that we can make it work. So it's good to see that we have that list.
Thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. Moving on, we are on item G, reappoint Jeff Piecewicz to the Public Safety District Board.
Thank you. You have me, Kurt Hanson, Economic Community Development Director. Appreciate the chance here. Good afternoon. So before council here this afternoon is consideration for a reappointment. As council recalls, we have 5 public facility district board members. Their appointments are made by council on staggering years. So it seems like almost every year now we're going to have a reappointment that comes before council for consideration. In this case, we have position number 1. It's Jeff Piecewicz. Jeff was actually appointed to the board in 2013. So our typical approach here is if a member is still interested in serving, we would offer it up to council for a reappointment. In this case, Jeff has been, a tremendous addition here on the district board and is serving the board well. I will say I reached out to the district chair, Greg Hafner, this afternoon, had a nice talk with him, and he actually submitted for me just a few comments that he'd like me to enter in for council consideration. He writes, "Please take this as my endorsement of Jeff Piecewicz for another term as a member of the Public Facility District Board for Cecil-Showare. Jeff has been a valued member of the board since 2013. His extensive experience in project and finance resource management has been very helpful to the board's work to oversee Cecil-Showare's financial obligations." So I will say in the attached motion, and then in the summary, there was a little bit of a conflict. In the summary, it said I had actually written that it was for a 3-year term. Position 1 is actually up for a 4-year term. So my apologies on that. The motion is correct, but the summary language behind it there was that conflict. So with that, I'm happy to try and answer any questions you might have.
Great. Councilmember Core, followed by Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you. Kurt, have we decided to look into opening up these seats? Because I know I've had conversations with Derek, and I've had just conversations as part of even SCA's equity training that we should at least have term limits on most of our boards and commissions. And I would like us to actually look at that option, because I think we need to give a chance to other people in our community to make our boards and commissions actually reflect the people of Kent. So I know Mr. Piecewicz has probably done amazing work on this board, and we're okay with approving that this time. But I think we should really consider having term limits and looking at opening up these positions to different people living in our community, so that we have fresh, individuals. We have diverse voices on our boards and our commissions, reflecting our community. So I'd like to echo that, and I hope we can look into that as soon as possible. I've talked about this since beginning of this year. We keep talking about it. I think we need to take some action on that. So thank you.
Great comment, Councilmember Core. Before I move on to Councilmember Larmer, Derek, you might need to jump in. Did we have an opening for this board at some point last year where we took applications?
We did. It was one of the positions that was for a representative of community organizations or labor councils. And I believe that was the appointment of Zenobia Harris.
Okay, I thought we had made an appointment, and I just wanted to ask that question. Councilmember Larmer.
Yeah, so actually, I just want to echo everything Councilmember Core expressed. That's been a concern of mine as well. And that's, a key, I think, both an equity issue and also just having, encouraging more civic engagement. I'm quite concerned that we have these positions that we don't open up for new voices or new perspectives. We just keep rolling them over as long as the person's interested. And again, this is in no way, a reflection on Jeff. And but this is just more a general statement that I think we need to definitely look at diversifying and having term limits and having new opportunities for civic engagement with all of our boards and commissions. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Kurt. Kurt, has anyone else shown any interest, or was there an advertisement for this position? How did that work?
Sure. Typically, when we have vacancies, when there's a vacancy, when somebody steps down, most recently we had Mike Miller, for instance, moved, right? So he retired and moved out of the city. He was serving as chair. The position was open. And so what happened then was we did do a solicitation. Now, I'm not prepared this afternoon to tell you what extent that was, how it was published, or what kind of canvassing was done. I honestly don't know. But that's, if we have a vacancy that's there, then it would be open and we would go through an application process. Historically, and it's not that long of history, right? It's about 10 years. When there's an appointment that's going to happen, a term comes up, if the member that's in the position is still interested, for efficiencies, historically we have just brought it before council for a reappointment. But I hear council loud and clear. I don't think there's anything in the bylaws that would preclude this. I have it open right now, just kind of skimming over it, but that's something that Pat and I can work on together. And we can either present a package to you, and I do think it'd be also really time well spent to have a discussion at the actual district meeting when we're able to do that again, to talk about it with the district itself. So on that, I got all the comments. I hear you loud and clear, and I think that's something that we can bring forward, whether it's term limits or a different way of advertising vacancies. I think that's something we can do.
Great, thank you, Kurt. Any other questions about this or any comments?
Yeah, Council President, I had a follow-up question. So Kurt, you said that there is it was written as a 3-year term, but it's actually a 4-year term. Are all the seats 4-year terms, or I just wanted some clarity on the terms?
Sure. The way it was set up, back at the creation of Assessor Showware, we had to create 5 positions. The first position was a 1-year term, a 2-year term, 3, 4. So you kind of get the idea that they would stagger. So not all the positions would be vacated at the same time. And that's how it's rolled through. In this case, it's position 1, which is a 4-year term. So it's kind of random how the staggering worked there. But the idea is you don't get multiple vacancies in one season, 1 year.
Okay, so it's whoever's sitting in this seat that has a 1-year term, they're always up every year?
Gosh.
I can jump in here if you'd like.
Go ahead, Pat.
All right, thanks. So yeah, Kurt's right. The initial terms of everybody were staggered so that they wouldn't come up at the same time. But after that staggering is over, after their initial term ends, all positions revert 4-year terms. So all of them serve 4-year terms. In some instances, though, we have a resignation or something like that, and so the term would come up early. They would end up serving the remaining part of the 4-year term of the person who they replaced if we have to do a midterm replacement, just as if a council member were to resign midterm. So they're all 4-year terms after that initial establishment of the PFD board.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. So anybody have any other questions about that?
Madam President?
Yes, go ahead.
I understand what my fellow council members are saying. I guess before we have Kurt go or do a bunch of work, I think I only heard 2 council members that was interested in that. So I don't know what the process is to have them go and do a bunch of work. I think you may want to make sure that, everybody kind of feel that way, or, just kind of do a process check, just something to think about.
Well, and Councilmember Fincher also chimed in that she was interested. I'm just curious to know as well, when terms are up for any of the other members. I feel like if this was already offered to Jeff and he accepted it, I don't know as far as moving forward if it's something that we can choose to get some more information on, and if everybody is okay with that.
Well, I think in this case here, it's a done deal. I think Jeff should go forward. And for me personally, I would be open to at least having a conversation about what Councilmember Corr talked about. I do believe that, these are great people who have served on this committee and this district and done a phenomenal job, right? So I think like anything else, I don't know what it may be, maybe 2 terms or 1 term or whatever. I will be open personally to have a conversation about it and say, let's kind of spread the wealth, get new ideas, new thoughts in. I think that may be a good approach, right? But I think with this particular one here, Jeff raised the hand. I think we had an issue maybe the last time where Van kind of thought it was open, but it wasn't open, and we agreed going forward. If the person is on the district who want to run, then we won't open it up. So, we need to stick to that with Jeff. But however, I think going forward, I personally, I will be open to having dialogue with my fellow council member to look at ways to diversify, bring new ideas and thoughts onto this here district. So.
I agree. And I think maybe a full list of, information about who currently serves on the board, their terms, and some of their background. I see some hands raised. I don't know if you still have any more comments. Councilmember Michaud, then Fincher, then Corr, then Larmer. So if you still have your hand raised and you have a question or comment, Councilmember Michaud.
Oh, yes. I just agree with my fellow council members and with everything that Councilmember Weiss said.
Perfect. Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you, Council President. I had put my comment in the chat, and my apologies that you didn't see that, Councilmember Boyce. But yes, I'm in complete agreement with Councilmembers Corr and Larimer, and I'm also in agreement that Jeff's name was put forth for this position so that we should move forward with that one. But for the future, we should open that up.
Okay, Councilmember Corr.
Thank you. Had a difficulty finding my mute button. I agree with Councilmember Boyce. We were talking about in future. I think we should look at all boards and commissions. We should have a conversation about opening them up, even if people want to serve, then having that conversation, because I think we need new people. I think we need to, I'm not saying that anybody's doing a bad job. I just think we should open it up to our new communities, our people and individuals living in our city who want to serve and they want to be engaged. So this is an opportunity for them to be engaged in our city. So I think that's the conversation we definitely need to have. And it looks like most of my fellow council members are on the same page with me. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Larmer, did you have anything additional?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that I absolutely think we should move forward with Jeff tonight. That absolutely have no problem reappointing him. And I think before, Kurt and Patrick go off and put time and effort into this, we need to have a conversation. I would like to see that time and effort put into it being across all boards and commissions. I think, as Councilmember Corr said, it's throughout the entire, like all departments, all commissions, all advisory boards. I think it would make more sense to take a look at it in a holistic way and look at all of them.
Great. All right. So I'm hearing from everyone that everyone is okay moving Jeff forward for this appointment. And then maybe if I can just make a suggestion, it's December, and I believe that we usually have some kind of a retreat around February, that this might be a really great topic to add to that retreat, where we can have a good discussion about what our boards and commissions look like. And that can give some of our team members chance to, see what that looks like and then be able to get back to us so that we can look at that. So if everyone's okay, we can move on in the agenda then. All right, moving on. So everyone's okay. We're going to move that to the consent calendar to reappoint Jeff Piecewicz to the PFD board. We are on to item number H, which is Meet Me on Meeker update.
Good evening, everyone. This is Hayley Bonsteel, Long Range Planning Manager, and I'm joined this evening by Chad Buren, who is going to help me tell you about what's been happening on Meeker Street. So every year we do an update, or we try to, and this one we're going to go pretty quickly to sort of a status update of where we are with the various segments, and then we're going to focus in on one particular area where we have some decisions to make. So go ahead to our first slide. Just a brief project history. I won't bore you. Hopefully you're all very familiar with this project that came out of the Economic Development Plan and has been in process for several years now. New design and construction standards that we passed really paved the way for some actual projects to happen on the ground. So let's jump right in and take a look at the whole corridor. On the next slide, as you're aware, it goes from Green River all the way into our downtown. Next slide, please. In fact, you can go to. Thank you. So let's go ahead and start all the way on the west with Ethos. Next slide. This was the first segment to be complete besides the 4th and Meeker bulb out, which I never want to skip over, but it was more of a spot improvement than it was a segment. So Kim, if we could go another slide. Perfect. This one was entirely paid for by private development, and the standards were not in place yet. However, design elements were included through collaboration with FNW. So you see the Green River Trail connection we passed by. This opened in 2019. We're moving pretty fast, which is good. On-street parking was added. It's a bit of a wet day. And that, hopefully you've all been out there, you've taken walks, you're very familiar with what that feels like. So the next piece that's very exciting to talk about is the driving range, because this one is city-owned property. So I'm not sure if my video is slow or if I'm not saying next slide enough, but I'd love to be on the map of the driving range if I'm not on it already. So the driving range was undergoing a rehabilitation, which was really a perfect opportunity to redo the street frontage with parking lot and street project wrapped actually into the same bid, which I don't know enough about except to know that it was a collaboration between Public Works and Parks, which I really want to give them kudos for. So construction is complete on this segment, except for just some installation of light poles. I think they're still waiting on, and maybe a few other things. And just to remind everyone that this was funded through a grant from Washington State Transportation Improvement Board, TIB, as well as Parks Driving Range, placemaking, and capital resource allocation. So a lot of good pictures available. I'm not sure what's happening exactly with the slides, but if we could move forward to the Riverwood Apartments, that is the next segment that I would love to talk about, because construction just started at the end of November, and this is the segment just east of Russell. This segment was funded through federal grants, what we call CMAQ, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, as well as a city match from the Capital Resources Fund. So we can check out the photos of the Riverwood Apartments. Still not exactly sure what's happening with slides, but I think advancing a little bit farther might be warranted. Yes, there we go, seeing Riverwood. So we were really excited to rank high enough in the grants a few years ago because we actually got federal funding off of the contingency list. So that means we didn't quite rank high enough to get money. We got sort of on the first list if anybody turned money back, but it turns out that's actually a pretty good bet because very frequently cities aren't able to move forward with their projects and actually turn money back in. So staff really had to react very quickly to complete the design and add to be able to secure that grant funding. So major kudos there. So these all photos are of the existing, and just a note as well that this segment would have required about a foot or two of right-of-way beyond this fence if we had gone with the full promenade. So here we did a strategic adjustment of just narrowing everything up a little bit in terms of our design so that we could just replace that fence in the same location as it is now. So I'm going to come back to that concept in a moment. But that's an example of where the city was already sort of being strategic and saying, if we had to acquire right-of-way, we would never have gotten these grants. It would have been much more complicated. Let's go ahead and narrow the promenade a little bit while still retaining all of the good stuff about it. So moving east from here, next slide shows the segment at 64th and Meeker in Midtown Apartments. Never sure what the current name is, but this is under construction now as well. This is privately funded, of course, part of the Midtown 64th development. So I think the corner is complete and the other areas are still under construction. That's what photos show on the next two slides. And this is very similar to the improvements at Ethos. We have an on-street parking. It's got the really nice sidewalk scoring. It's got the, all the little detailing. And I think this really, between all of the segments that we've talked about so far, it's just a really huge connection that's being made as we speak, really. So now let's talk about where it starts to get a little bit more interesting, a little trickier. Next slide. Let's see, and maybe, just the next slide. So as you know, we've worked a lot with the school because, of course, starting at 64th, you have sort of the Starbucks right there. And then the school property. We had tree experts come out. We had our designers try on different ideas. We talked to the district about building the promenade in the school property. So this is where I want to focus today because the update this year is that the school district, we had thought was sort of signaling that they might transfer the property to us at no cost. And then they kind of were actually expressing intent to sell it to us at a cost. We don't know what that cost would have been exactly, but we would need 15 feet or so for the full promenade. And that seems pretty significant. And additionally, our designers were kind of looking at what the options were within the street, what the costs would be of building up sort of onto the tree roots, basically, on the school property. And so we've really done a lot of important thinking here that I want to discuss this evening. And one of the main pieces that has informed the conversation about the school is when we look at the segment east of here, our brilliant engineers had to determine how we would safely tie in the promenade across the school to the fast food row driveway area that's east of this. So let's go one more slide just to show where we're talking about there. So the low likelihood of redevelopment anytime in the near future for this area meant that we really had to turn our attention to this segment, which if anybody has been paying attention to me closely, they might have noticed that I often drew sort of a hazy bubble around this area and said, this will be such a challenge that we'll get to when we get to it. And so it's kind of been like becoming increasingly obvious that we need to work some things out about this to be able to safely move forward with a concept at the school, because there's, there was no intersection or any way to tie in whatever was built at the school. So I'm really excited to show you some renderings that the Public Works team have put together of a concept that actually works within the existing right-of-way in a slightly different way than the promenade envisioned. And so I'm going to walk you through kind of what it might look like, what it means, what the cost savings are, what the feasibility differences are, which I'll hopefully Chad can kind of help us with that, and talk about what I see as sort of the pros and cons of this. And what I'd love to do this evening is to take the temperature of council to see if they think we're on the right track. So the next slide kind of shows this new vision from a sort of high up view, maybe not quite bird's eye, but maybe a low flying bird. So I'm not sure if the slides are going, but the school is on the right. Thank you. And the sort of shag tricourt senior living facility is on the left. And so what you see here is still a very treed, a very vegetated, sort of heavy vegetation, very, a lot of what we call visual friction to slow drivers down, to let them, to signal to drivers that there are people here who, we need to take care of, who we need to be safe around. And, obviously from this angle, you're not going to be able to see the details. So let's zoom into the next slide. We'll talk a little more in detail. We really want to have a similar aesthetic treatment to the pavement for an overall look and feel that's very similar to the Meeker Promenade. But it's not going to be the same level of concrete. Concrete is really expensive. And the concrete promenade in particular, if you have to remove the gutter and move the curb, that really drives the cost up so much. So because the sidewalk in this area is in good condition and there is a bit of room to work with within the right-of-way, we have this concept that shows where the concrete promenade would actually give way to slightly more spaced out modes, non-motorized connection, and the sidewalk would actually be a little narrower than how it has been built so far, but you would have this two-way bike travel that would actually be sort of on street. That's what you see on the right, with these really nice buffers. So let's go to the next slide. The next few are shown without the same level of detail, so you won't see quite as much vegetation, but the idea is we would maximize the vegetation. This is just to get you a sense for the bigger picture. The new proposed lane configuration would be one-way travel each way for cars, on-street parking just like we have in other segments, a vegetated buffer, which we would have, low growing things if there was a sight distance issue, or trees if there's no sight distance issue. A buffer and a two-way cycle track in asphalt instead of concrete. So that would leave the curb and gutters in place. Chad mentions that it would save roughly 15 to 20% over building the full promenade and without impacting the school property. So we're also saving right-of-way costs. Now, if anybody is as excited about this as me, they may be recalling this bright, beautiful, colorful fence that we had planned with the Kent School District, and we can still work together with them to get the fence replaced the way that the school asked for it, because that can basically happen separately because it wouldn't need to be tied into any right-of-way. So right now we're looking east. We're going to start looking north, and then we're going to start looking west. So I'll try to help orient everyone so we're not getting lost out there. But let's go to the next slide, just looking at this mid-block crosswalk. We do have a meeting scheduled with the school next week to discuss some of the operational implications of having a crosswalk on this side of the school property. So we would have to we'll need to work through with them how it would work with crossing guards and whether or not their school property would open that way. There's a lot of those sort of details that, of course, I never think about at the beginning when I get excited about ideas, and then it turns out there's a lot of things we worked out. So we'll be discussing that with them. I think it's next week. And then this next one starts going a little bit farther east, but looking west. So we're going to look towards the school from approximately the taco time, and the post office driveway where the trucks turn in and out is where the kind of smaller silver SUV is shown in the back there. So you can really see here that all those driveways mean that we've had to really reduce the amount of green space. We have to reduce that buffer a lot. So Chad, do you want to jump in and talk at all about the potentials here for rerouting how the vehicles travel?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Hayley. So as Hayley pointed out, when we get to fast food row, we have Taco Time, Burger King, McDonald's, and then there's the Chevron at the end of the block there. There are a lot of driveways, and we're taking a look right now. Eric Preston, our traffic engineer, is looking at alternatives for accessing those driveways as far as going even from the south and reducing them down to, say, instead of 4 driveways, down to 2 or even 1. It's something that we'll need to work through with the owners of those franchises, as well as the property owner to the south where the Kmart is currently located. And it would be part of a more of a sub-regional improvement between this U.S. Post Office driveway where that silver SUV is and Washington Avenue to try and kind of reconfigure how folks access those properties. And it would be quite a discussion we need to have with the property owners to make sure that their understanding is that we're trying to continue to provide access to their parcels, but also allow pedestrians and bicyclists to get through this area more comfortably. If you've ever walked through that area between Washington Avenue and 64th, it's not fun as a pedestrian or if you're on a bicycle to get through there. If you're in a car, it's fine, but if you're not, you really feel like someone's bearing down on you. So what we're trying to attempt to do is along with the rest of the Meeker improvements, really reconfigure how folks get through here and make it more of a pedestrian-friendly area so we can tie in the areas to the west all the way to our historic downtown and get some foot traffic through here. So again, we're working with Eric Preston to get a preliminary access study done, and we're going to be taking that to the U.S. Post Office and talking about the potential for putting a signal in right where that silver SUV is, that driveway. And that would allow us to do some different things with access to those parcels that we call fast food row.
Thank you, Chad. So the next slide, then kind of tying what Chad said together with as we continue to move further east, we're still looking west. What we're seeing on the screen is a sort of thing different with these driveways or get a signal, enables us to have a decent connection. So the design would still have the iconic light poles, maximize vegetation, as I mentioned. We'd still have sort of safe and hopefully fun and welcoming multimodal travel. But the whole thing would be a lot more a bit more budget conscious than designing to the full promenade build out. And hopefully, if they are able to pursue some of those conversations to fruition, we'll actually have even more than what's shown here in terms of a sort of safe and welcoming facility. So let's go to the next slide. This is just one that we've seen before, but I think it's kind of the best shot because it shows all the nice trees and everything, which I get excited about. So we really wanted to give council a chance to see how the concept for the segment is evolving. We've done just a ton of thinking about it and a lot of back and forth. We wanted to let you know our progress made to date on this. I think, the project really has an incredible amount of momentum at this point. It's, the progress that's been made in just a few years is really significant. So I think it's sort of incumbent upon the city to make the connection across this difficult segment happen in the near future instead of like the very distant future if we were to just rely on private development. So, that would really leave the segments that have been built so far stranded. If redevelopment ever does occur, we would still be expecting the full promenade. So it's really like in the interim, but the interim could be sort of a lifetime. And we think that the concepts shown here, maybe one more slide, Kim, is the best way to get that done. So we are happy to take feedback now, or if you'd like to think more about it or talk more about it, or would like to explore an alternative, we're very open to that. But, if the concept, has legs to everybody involved, I think we'll probably continue working on the design with the capital budget allocation from, I think it was last year. We'll share the concept with the school district and the elementary school, and we'll probably pursue grant funding, although I think federal grants are not again until 2022. So it may be, a year out, which might work well in terms of getting far enough in design to feel really confident about our cost estimate and that kind of stuff. So I think that's all that I have. Chad, do you have anything else that you want to mention?
Yeah, thanks, Hayley. I just want to be really clear. We have a Meeker Street standard that council adopted. and it has a number of prescriptive items in there that any developer would need to include in a proposed new development. So those elements are included out at Ethos, where the Par 3 was, and also at Midtown 64, where GRE did its improvements. And as Hayley mentioned, just to be again clear, if anybody else along the way redeveloped, we'd have them include those elements. And so the question we're really asking is, is council okay with flexing on several of those elements in order to get the project done between 64th and Washington, and further along that intent to get a pedestrian facility out there, a pedestrian area out there, without going to the full extent of the Meeker Street standards? Because if we try to do that with public money, we'd be buying right of way and incurring significant costs that we don't think we'd be able to make up the budget for. So this is a way, as Hayley put it, of getting us with the look and feel as close as we can without spending a lot of money.
All right, so I am going to see if there's any feedback or comments or questions from council members, and I will start with Councilmember Fincher, then Boyce, then Larmer.
Thank you. So currently for the distribution center that they enter on 64th, where were you talking about possibly having the entrances, and where was that light going to be?
Yeah, Kim, if you could go back to that screenshot where we had the silver SUV. The U.S. Post Office Distribution Center, it can enter at two places, on 64th, but also they have a driveway that runs up between the Taco Time and the school. That you don't notice that much when you're driving down the street, but they actually use it quite a bit. And what we're proposing to do is look at a signal at that intersection that would potentially also include access for the fast food row restaurants and the Kmart site. So we're in very, very preliminary discussions with the post office because they own that driveway and this pipe stem of property that intersects with Meeker Street. So they really hold all the cards on this, but we're hopeful that we can work with them to provide access for many more parcels in exchange for having a signalized access to Meeker Street. And that would concentrate the traffic at the signal as opposed to all those driveways along the way.
Okay, and then further up, I think it was on the eastbound side, saw where there appeared to be 3 lanes. Would that be a right turn, left turn, straight ahead lane? Or was it not really 3 lanes?
So there are 3 lanes. It's 1 lane each direction for most of that, but there will be a right turn lane as you get close to Washington Avenue. The traffic analysis showed that we just could not make it with 1 eastbound lane when we got close to that intersection.
Okay, would you go up to the picture that showed up by Washington Avenue, the fast food row portion?
I think it's the one that had McDonald's in it. One more. Right, is that it, Councilmember?
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah, so looks like 3 there where they are, and there's a yellow line, so there's still the westbound.
Yeah, so those are the eastbound. You got the 1 lane westbound on the right side of the yellow line, and then it's a eastbound to northbound left turn lane, a through lane, the green car is in, and then a right turn lane next to that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Boyce, you're up.
Thank you, Madam President. Hey, team, I think you mentioned something about asphalt versus cement. What area are we talking about?
Yeah, thank you. So that's the cycle tracks. If you see the little bicycle symbols on the asphalt there, in this design, they are shown basically on the existing street. So that would be an asphalt versus over at Ethos and 64th, that bike facility is done in concrete. So to me, that's the biggest visual difference, just because it goes literally from white to black. I mean, that's a really strong contrast. And I think the unified look of the concrete is definitely, stark out there. I mean, it's very distinctive, I would say, in the existing segments. So to me, that is sort of one of the bigger sacrifices of this concept, is that you go to asphalt instead of having concrete panels for the bicyclists. Now, that said, some bicyclists prefer being on asphalt, so we would a little bit be, giving folks several different experiences. If they have preferences, that might be good. And also, the actual impact in terms of the comfort of the facility or the safety of the facility is really not going to be that different. And that is really important. So my thought is that with the other aesthetic treatments, those would be enough to outweigh the fact that that bike facility was in concrete and other segments and would be in asphalt in this segment.
Yeah, I think that's okay. It's for bikes, right? So I think the durability of the asphalt would probably last, right? If it's a car going from cement to asphalt, I will push a little hard on that. But since it's a bike lane, I think that's doable. I don't see any issue with that. My other question is, when you had that crosswalk by the school, what's the safety around that? So we got kids going to be crossing that, right? So I'm assuming there'll be some high flashing light. I'm assuming the speed limit on that road, is it 35? That's a Kurt, Chad, somebody, I don't know.
It's 30, but we'll be looking to reduce it as we make the improvements. And then if we end up with a crosswalk right here, we have the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Yep, flashing lights.
I think about the kids, right? The kids going to be crossing that and safety coming to me right away. So, okay. I mean, I think that's critical. We mentioned we got the flashing beacons, the kids that are crossing. And then the other question, you probably can't answer this here. So I think, does the south sides look good? What's the plan for the north side? Because that is...
Yes, that's the other gray area that I have always sort of put a circle around and said someday. The north side, I think we would be waiting for redevelopment to redo the sidewalk. Now, the changes planned for the north side are more limited. So it won't be a huge difference. If redevelopment does occur, you'll see a slightly different sidewalk scoring pattern and potentially some colored pavers and eventually the lights as well. But that is definitely seen as a lower priority for most folks on this project because the design doesn't really change radically the non-motorized facility available. We'd actually be removing the bike lane on the north side that exists today intermittently because we are building it on the south side. So the south side really becomes the main connection. And the north side still has sidewalk, for people who want to be on that side of the street, but it's not, it doesn't have the same level of design and amenities as the south.
And I was thinking from a building perspective, right? If I'm driving here to east, I only want to look right. I don't want to look on my left side. But what is the standards for some of those buildings? I look at some of those buildings I drive down there, they probably not in the best standards. I'm not sure they're even meeting code. It is something we can look into to make sure they look halfway decent. That's such a nice gateway to the city, right? And as I say, if you're heading east, the south side look extremely well, and then look on the north, it look like you're in a different world. So what is the plan for at least making some of the owners come to some type of standards in some of those buildings and office and so on?
Well, unless anyone comes to my rescue, I'll do my best to answer you. But if anyone else has any ideas, they should jump in. I would say that it would really be either a code enforcement issue or redevelopment. So that leaves quite a gulf between a code enforcement issue and future redevelopment. But I see those as the main ways that we can expect a property to have a radically different appearance than what it has today. Any project that comes in here will go through design review. So if there is a redevelopment project, I mean, you've seen some of the new development that has gone up. It's definitely very high quality, and we feel that that's a really good way to get that in new buildings. But in terms of the existing buildings, I think it would have to get to a code enforcement point for us to enforce any kind of upgrade.
Yeah, I was thinking that, Hayley, I mean, development is probably not going to happen tomorrow, right? But I just think from a code enforcement, maybe you could have the team look as part of we move forward to see, making sure that the buildings and the owners are, up to standards. As I drive through them, I'm sure like everyone else, it's not a good eyesore, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, thank you for that comment.
Kurt, I saw you had your hand up. I didn't know if you wanted to chime in or if you decided that it was answered good enough.
Well, I think it was a good answer. I'm going to say the kinder, gentler city is going to be, we are trying to incentivize property owners along the corridor, south and north side, with this new investment, both public and private, that the opportunity grows such that keeping properties in, in their current state, in some that Councilmember Boyce had made reference to, is no longer financially feasible. I mean, that's the concept, is we're providing a really good opportunity for redevelopment right now, and it's easier on bigger sites, and we've seen it happen. I'm going to say in the matter of years, maybe 2 years, we're going to start seeing much more interest along this corridor as a result of the public infrastructure pieces that we're putting into play here. So really, it's that opportunity cost, that economic gain, where it gets too expensive for them to keep it in the shape that it's in today. So, but you're right, there are some code enforcement opportunities that we can also address.
I think, Kurt, when we first started this journey many, many years ago, right? I mean, we talked about this being a gateway to the city, right? And I think this is such a great start, right? So I just look forward to the other opportunities to really focus it on the way to incentivize, I should say, the north side. So, but thank you for your answer. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you. So question for Hayley. With the signal, if that moves forward, would we move that crosswalk? Because it didn't look on the slides like it was very far. Would it?
Yeah, good question. Chad and I were just discussing that actually before this. So, I think the original goal of the Meet Me on Meeker project was to have much more frequent crossings so that there would be a crosswalk between 64th and that post office driveway. However, the location of that crosswalk is very tricky because it needs to not impact the signal at 64th in terms of cars queuing there, as well as there's like the fire lane and some kind of entrance exit to the tri-court. And so the result is that we don't have a ton of options where we can place that crosswalk. So if the post office signal were to go through, I think we would have to take another look at the crosswalk to see, is there a location that actually works and makes sense? It's actually hugely long. It's what we call a super block to go from 64th to Washington. So even adding a signal right in the middle would still be quite a distance from 64th to that signal. Mm-hmm. So that is why the mid-block crosswalk is still on the table. But if we are really getting a lot of traction on the post office driveway signal, we'll need to reevaluate whether there's a way for it to fit and with the space that makes sense.
And I wonder if it might be safer too in that regard and address some of the safety issues. My other comment was, I would like to see there, is there some way that we could, even before private improvement, is there some way to add some vegetation to the north side? That would be, my only request.
Okay.
All right, Councilmember Thomas, do you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm concerned, I guess, about emergency vehicles, fire departments, police. There's not much room there if there's heavy traffic.
Chad, do you want to talk at all about what's the word for the design vehicle?
Well, we've got the design vehicles included in turning movements at the intersections, but we would have emergency vehicle preemption on the signals to try and move cars along if there was an emergency. And then along with this signal at the U.S. Post Office, is the proposed signal. Again, we're putting on, a lot of eggs in that basket, and we're hoping we can make it work out. But we're going to try and develop more of a set of block access points. One at the U.S. Post Office intersection with Meeker, and then over on Washington Avenue, we're also trying to look at a new intersection there. So we're trying to make it more of a city block, 300-foot, 600-foot spacing, as opposed to a longer block like 64th to Washington. So it should help to ameliorate issues with congestion and emergency vehicle access. I hope that helped answer it.
Well, it does,
Okay.
but I don't see it happening. I'm just curious. I'd like to see how that would work out.
That's something we could take and I could discuss with Rob and Eric and come back with a more developed answer.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyce, did you have anything else to add?
Sorry. I want to get clarification on what Hayley was asking for. I think I'm okay with the modification. I think that's the question she was asking us. So, Katie, can you just kind of, Hayley, I'm sorry, repeat what direction you're looking for, please?
Yeah, thank you. I think I just want to confirm with the council that if if there was a capital project request for a section of Meeker here, or maybe it's a grant funding request where there's a match or something like that, that basically is council on board with staff continuing to pursue a design that adjusts the promenade in the way that's shown, so that rather than the standard Meeker promenade that has been built so far, we would be building more of a separated facility that has some of those Meeker elements, but it's a little bit different. And so I just wanted to confirm if council was sort of on board with that concept. And obviously when there are official decision points for accepting grants or something like that, you'll have another chance to talk about it. But we do want to make sure that our design is progressing in a way that makes sense to everyone.
So my answer, I'm okay with that. I'm assuming there's not going to be a major design change. There's some elements to really kind of try to save costs so we can move forward. So I trust the team. You guys have come a long way with this year, so I'm really pleased. So I will give you a thumbs up to keep moving forward, and you have my blessing.
Thank you.
And I agree. I think there's been some comments and feedback that have kind of helped give you an idea of, a few other things to tweak and to look at, but I don't think that it strays away from the major design much at all. So
thanks. That's great. Appreciate it.
Anybody else have any other feedback for this? All right. Great job, Hayley. Thank you, Chad, for your input as well. All right, and we are moving on in the agenda to item I, which is also information only, third quarter 2020 investment report.
Good evening, I'm Joe Bartlemay. I'm the Cash and Investment Officer with the Finance Department. And today I'll be presenting cash and investment reports for the third quarter of 2020. And this report was presented to the Investment Advisory Board on November 19th. So our portfolio is composed of three basic components. We have cash in the bank. We have the Washington State local government investment pool that's run by the state treasurer, very liquid, and we can access our money very easily. And then we have our managed portfolio with our investment advisors at PFM, and that's our longer term portion of our investment portfolio. You'll notice that the yields are substantially higher in that managed portfolio, and that's due to that longer maturities in that portfolio overall. Investment total, that's our book value at the end of the third quarter, is just over $232 million. Market value is a very strong $236 million. That strong market value is a reflection of the high quality of the portfolio overall. That would be the estimated value if we had to liquidate the portfolio at that point in time. So we're in a good position there. You can see we have just about half of our funds in that managed portfolio, and just enough cash to meet our daily needs in cash in the bank. And then that local government investment pool is our short-term liquidity. We can access that as needed. Next slide. So this next chart shows the cash and investment balances over the recent 5 quarters. At the bottom is the cash, and we keep just enough to keep, like I said, to meet our daily cash needs. That next line up is the state investment pool. We transfer money in and out as needed. If we have a little bit of excess cash, transfer it in and transfer out if we need a little bit. The orange line in the middle there is that managed portfolio. We keep about a static $120 million in that portfolio right now. And then the line at the top is just total cash and investments. And the changes over the quarters is really mostly a reflection of the changes in the local government investment pool portion of the portfolio. This slide is a 3-year comparison of total cash and investments by month. So you can see the very similar cash flows from year to year. 2020 is the red line up at the top, and 2018 is the bottom line. So you can see overall from year to year, our balances are a little bit higher. Cash flows, again, fairly similar from year to year. This slide represents our interest earnings over 5 quarters. The dark blue line on the left is general fund only interest earnings. The lighter blue bar is all other funds combined. You'll notice slightly lower earnings in the third quarter of 2020, and that's a reflection primarily of the declining rates in the local government investment pool. This slide is total cash and investment balances by fund. So you can see of that total portfolio I showed you earlier, this is how much each fund in the city owns. The general fund, street fund, capital funds, and utility funds, as well as the insurance fund, tend to carry those higher balances. You might notice a negative balance there in the 1800 fund, the Housing and Community Services. That fund is reimbursed by the Community Development Block Grant Fund after funds are spent. The 1900 fund will be reimbursed by the CARES grant. This slide demonstrates just that PFM managed portfolio, that roughly $120 million portion of our investment pool that PFM manages for us. And you might notice on the lower left there, that's the maturity ladder that shows the maturities out to 5 years as allowed by our policy. That laddered maturity helps to sort of smooth out the earnings over the life of the portfolio, and we don't notice the declining rates quite as much as we notice them in the state investment pool. They decline much faster there. This slide demonstrates portfolio compliance with our investment policy. So you'll notice on the left is the investment type, and then sort of the next portion over is the percentage of our portfolio that investment type has. The middle there is how much of that investment type we can have in our portfolio. So you can see that we're well within compliance on all of the various investment types. Over there on the right is the prior quarter's balances. Not too much change from quarter to quarter. So the last item, in the most recent investment advisory board meeting, the board recommended that we move an additional $70 million from the state investment pool to that PFM managed portfolio. With the declining rates in the state investment pool, we can earn significantly more interest by moving it to the longer term investments. Currently, we have roughly $120 million invested with the PFM portfolio. We recommend an additional $70 million. That would give us about $190 million in that managed portfolio. Along with that would be additional advisor fees. We currently pay about $92,000 per year in fees to that advisor. Fees would increase by about $42,000 to a total of $134,000 per year. Liquidity would remain about 17% of cash and investments, and that will meet our short-term needs, about $40 million at year end to cover those short-term cash flows. So next steps going forward is we will work on updating that contract with our investment advisor, and more to come.
All right. I just have a question. It looks like a lot in advisor fees, but I suppose that's probably the business to be in and if they're investing your money. But is that typical as far as that rate increase? Is it based on a percentage of money that's in there or a percentage of earnings? How is that fee based?
It is based on the portfolio size, and it's a sliding scale. The more we have invested, sort of the better deal we get. At the total of our the high end of our balance, it's 0.0006% or 0.06% of the investment total goes to the advisor fees, and that includes all the trades that they secure. So we're not paying fees to a separate broker or anything like that. PFM does manage all of that for us.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I do.
Councilmember Thomas, followed by Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you. So I want to segue onto what the council president was talking about here, because that's a huge increase in this advisor fee. Who exactly is our advisor that we're paying this much money to?
The advisor is PFM. I believe it used to stand for Public Finance Management.
I mean, that's almost a 50% increase. That's quite high.
That is based on almost a $200 million portfolio size.
I understand that, but just looking at it, if I'm looking at it going, whoa, from 92,000 to 42,000, I mean, an increase of 42,000. It's not like a 10% increase. It's a big increase. Do you see where I'm coming from?
I do.
This is Paula Painter, Finance Director. Can I jump in for just a moment to add some clarity?
Hi, Paula. Sure.
Hi, Paula.
Hi, thank you so much. Yes, Councilmember Thomas, you are correct. It does seem to be a big jump in fees related to managing this portfolio. But when you start looking at the fees that are encompassed in all investments, there is a fee that's associated with any sort of investment that you do. Sometimes you see that fee, sometimes you don't. They roll it in and you get to see the net earnings. In this case, we're talking about 6 basis points. So as Joe said, that's 0.06%. When you start looking at what we're earning in the state pool at this moment, it is less than 0.5%. So right now, even with a 6 basis point fee that we would pay, we are still likely to at least double what we are earning at this point in time in our state pool. So although the fee seems high, our net return that we're going to recognize is going to be better than what we would have in the state pool.
All right, and I appreciate that, Paula. However, if I'm a guy just working for 92,000 and all of a sudden I get a raise next year of 42,000 more, I'm going to be pretty happy. You see where I think this is where council president is concerned too, but I may be wrong, but I just think that's really high.
Yeah, and if you look too, though, at the amount of work that it takes to manage, we're now asking them to manage another $70 million on top of the $120 million, which means what they've been doing thus far to date is investing that money, looking for deals. They're going to have to now do this on a broader scale. In addition, there are some accounting standards that require us to do reporting within our financial statements. That's a little bit complicated. And luckily enough, PFM does a lot of that analysis and provides us with that information that we would need for that financial reporting as well.
Okay, but I'm still not happy.
I get it, Paula. Thank you for adding that extra information. Councilmember Boyce.
Yes, Paula, you said it much better than I did. I was going to say, if you look at the rate of return, right? When we went with PFM, and I think, maybe Joe could talk about the people who sits on this committee here, there's a lot of upwork was done up front to make sure we select the right investment, to make sure we get the right and a good return on our dollars, right? If you look at historically, for what we have received for return on investment from PFM. I mean, and what we could possibly get with the extra, $7 million. I mean, less at all people, I mean, when you invest in that big dollar amount of money, you're going to have to pay for it. But yet still, if you get a good return on investment, I think that's what we are seeing here, right? So I'm just going to, my main thing with you, just to really, if you look at the return on investment, that's really one thing we should be focusing on. And we looked at other firm as well too before we even chose PFM. So I think we kind of, within the guideline from their competitors on what we'll be paying them as well.
Good point, Councilmember Boyce. Any other questions or comments about this? All right, I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on in the agenda. This requires council approval for consolidating the budget adjustment ordinance, and this is for October 1st through November 30th.
Good evening, Council. I'm Michelle Ferguson, the Financial Planning Manager, and I'll be presenting the fourth quarter budget adjustment for 2020. This fourth quarter budget adjustment is reflecting an overall budget increase of $29,728,149. Previously approved budget expenditures increases total $11,574,830, and budget adjustments that have not been approved by Council total $18,153,319. For the majority of this presentation, I'll be using rounded numbers, but the ordinance exhibits do contain the exact budget expenditure figures. Highlights for the expenditure increases of $11.5 million that Council has previously approved include $6 million for CARES-related interlocal agreements. $5.8 million came from the Washington Department of Commerce, and $200,000 came from King County. $810,000 have been approved by Council for street capital projects, which include $285,000 for a King County grant for transit access improvements, $273,000 for sound transit interlocal agreement for the James and Second pedestrian crossing, and $251,000 for the sound transit interlocal agreement for the operation and maintenance facility. There was $1.86 million for Parks capital projects, which include a $1.15 million grant for the King County levies, and a $559,000 for the use of fee and lieu revenues. There's also a $284 million for the drainage grants, one Council has not yet approved. These increases total $18.15 million. And of that $18.15 million, over $7.5 million have been counted at least twice for accounting purposes. So we have to budget the expense transfer out of a fund, and then we need to budget the expense within a project and or operating budget. So it's really like $10.5 million in actual expenditures. So as you can see on this first bullet point, the budget change is to use a little over $4 million of TIF funds. $4 million has to be transferred out of the street fund, and then we have to budget $4 million within the projects for a total of an $8.1 million budget change. So $2 million of that will go towards the 228th Street grade separation, and a little over $2 million will go towards the 224th, 228th corridor. There is budget changes for $508,000 in LID transactions, and this is another example of how the money transfers in and out multiple times, so more than just once, to move it where it needs to be. So $508,000 will be transferred out of the LID fund and into various LID projects. Then those funds will be turned around and transferred out into the street fund. Then the street fund will then transfer those funds out to other various street projects, and then we need to budget $289,000 to spend within those projects, which total $1.8 million. $1.2 million will be budgeted in the fleet operating fund, and the fund balance will be used to purchase a portion of the 2021 budgeted replacement vehicles in 2020 in order to save cost on those replacement vehicles. In 2021, the $2.25 million budget for those replacement vehicles will be reduced by 1.2 million, and the excess will go back into fund balance. So there's not going to be double purchasing of these budgets for these cars. There's $975,000 that will be budgeted for CARES related expenses within the general fund. So $545,000 will be transferred out of the general fund for showware reopening related equipment for the COVID-19 pandemic, and then $545,000 will be budgeted within the Kent Event Center operating fund for the use of those monies. $145,000 will be transferred out of the general fund for the Fourth and Willis signs, and then $145,000 will be budgeted in the project to use those funds. $285,000 will be budgeted for additional laptops and other expenditures that, due to timing issues, we're not able to charge against the actual grant, which in total $1.66 million. These expenditures will be offset by the reimbursement of police payroll expenditures that will be submitted for the CARES funding. $855,000 will be budgeted for CDBG HUD block grants, and $425,000 will be budgeted for a public works modular building at Russell Road. $212,000 will be transferred out of the water fund, and $212,000 will be transferred out of the drainage fund, for a total of $425,000 being budgeted in the project, and altogether that is $850,000. Next page, please. $768,000 will be budgeted for in the red light camera fund for red light camera fees and other related red light camera expenditures. These expenditure increase are offset by additional revenues that have been received from the red light cameras this year. $664,000 will be budgeted in interest income transfers out of the capital project funds. So $664,000 will be transferred out of streets, parks, IT, capital, and facility capital projects, and then the use of $664,000 within various projects will be budgeted. Additionally, $16,000 in financial service fees will be budgeted for a total of $1.35 million. So when the 2020 budget was established, the revenues for the interest income were conservatively budgeted in the capital projects funds, but there were no offsetting expenditures. So this budget change is just to clean up to make sure we use those revenues. $119,000 will be budgeted for the guarantee fund transfer. So $119 will be transferred out of the guarantee fund to the general fund, and then another $119 will be budgeted to be transferred out of the general fund and into the Meet Me on Meeker project, and then $119 in expenditures within the project will be budgeted to total $357,000. $249,000 will be budgeted for increased insurance costs, which are mostly offset by reimbursements received in the liability fund. $116,000 budget change is needed to account for the affordable housing sales tax, which is the Housing Bill 1490 revenues. So we'll budget the expenditure to transfer them out, and then another $116,000 will be budgeted within the projects for a total of $233,000. $216,000 budget change is needed to transfer parks fee and lieu funds to various projects. And then $100,000 for the Meet Me on Meeker project. This is one of those budget changes where funds are just moving from one project to another. But in order to do that, $100,000 has to be transferred out of the Meet Me on Meeker placemaking project back into the general fund where the funds originated in a prior year. And then $100,000 has to be transferred out of the general fund and then use of the $100,000 within the Meeker and Russell Road project, totaling $200,000. $145,000 for adjustments to salary and benefit actual allocations within the solid waste fund. $76,000 for aerial imagery projects. $56,000 will be transferred out of the drainage fund and $20,000 transferred out of the IT GIS budget, and use of $76,000 within the project, totaling $132,000. The increase in the IT GIS budget is offset by a $20,000 reduction in IT GIS expenses. There's $496,000 that is being recognized from various parks capital revenues and corresponding expenditures. These revenues include funds that have come in from cell tower leases, other leases, sale of assets, donations, interest, and fees. And then there's a negative budget change for $1.5 million to correct the golf capital allocations, they were funded as part of the 2021 budget. And so we're just correcting it in 2020, so it's not double budgeted. Are there any questions?
Well, lots of numbers, Michelle. Thank you very much. Member Core.
Thank you. Michelle, can you go back a couple of slides, please?
Sure. Which general?
One more, please. So here, when you're saying out of general fund, is that being transferred? Where is it being transferred to? We're talking about the 545 transfer out of general fund.
Into the Kent Events Operating Center Fund. So that's where they'll use those funds for showware.
Okay. And can you go to the next slide, please? Not this one, maybe the following one. And House Bill, was that 1490 or was that 1590?
1590 we will budget in 2021. This is the one that was passed at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
And then we're going to join with the other King County cities and then pull it together and probably give it to Skip.
Okay, that's the funding then. And Derek, was the reopening of the showware cares, was that part of the spreadsheet you sent out? Because I don't remember.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
You can see there's on the summary PDF, you can see there's a line for that. And then you can see the individual expenditures in the Excel spreadsheet.
Okay, that's what I was looking for, individual expenditures. And I was not able to find that. Oh, it's under ACD maybe. Okay.
They haven't been purchased yet because we still need to get the budget to them.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair.
Councilmember Boyce.
Yeah, I'm tracking. This makes sense. I guess the one, could you explain the insurance one? I mean, I know it's small, but I don't understand the logic behind that one.
Sure. It's for the liability fund, the property insurance, as well as the unemployment fund. So it's a combination of those three. The bulk of it, about 200,000, is because we received revenues in the liability fund, and we're just budgeting the revenues and the offsetting expenditures. We're probably not going to use it, but just on the off chance, because those expenditures don't come in quite, we don't know what they're going to be at the end of the year when we get that last bill.
Okay, that's where I was going. Okay, all right. I'm good. I mean, this makes sense. A lot of movement, right? But it's been interesting 2020. I can't wait to 2021 to get here. So, but I get it. So, thank you.
All right. Any further questions before we discuss to move this onto the consent calendar? So these are the adjustments for fourth quarter. Is everyone okay moving these on to the consent? All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
And which is ordinance authorizing the transfer of excess local improvement district guarantee funds to the general fund. So Paula, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Council President Troutner, members of City Council, Mayor Ralph. Great to be here tonight. So I'm going to talk to you for just a moment about the guarantee fund. The city is required to set up a guarantee fund when we issue local improvement district bonds, or I'm just going to call it LIDs because that'll just make it easier for this discussion. But ultimately, this has been created in the past. We have funded, when we've issued LIDs, we have funded that debt or the guarantee fund by the required minimum of 10%. That requirement comes from us from an RCW. It's something that we have to ensure that no matter how much outstanding local improvement bonds that we have, that we carry that minimum of 10%. At this point in time, the city does not have any outstanding LID bonds to guarantee at this point in time. So what you have in front of you is an ordinance and also a memo certifying that we have sufficient funds that we need in order to cover any obligations of our LID guarantee fund. Currently, that fund has $118,651.21 in it. According to the RCW, we can move the excess funds from that LID fund into our general fund. And so that is what this ordinance in front of you would do, is move that into the general fund. During Michelle's presentation, you may have seen that there was a budget adjustment for $119,000 in which they would be taking those monies from the general fund and moving it to reinvest in the Meet Me on Meeker project that we've heard about tonight. I am more than happy to take any questions you might have about this.
Very good explanation, Paula. Anybody have questions for Paula on this? All right, so is everybody okay moving this, transferring the excess funds from the local improvement district guarantee fund to the general fund? All right, great. We will move that to the consent calendar. Okay, moving on, Paula, I'm sorry, we have payment of bills, which that comes to council. So if there's no questions on that, we will move on to item M, which is amendment to consultant service staffing agreements.
Thank you and good evening, Madam President, members of the council, Madam Mayor. This is Brian Rambunga, PMO supervisor with your Information Technology Department. I'm here to present for authorization amendments to consultant services agreements with 4 different staffing and recruitment agencies. Those agencies are Scion Staffing Incorporated, Viri Technology, Protingen Incorporated, and Robert Half International Incorporated. These agencies specialize in placing IT professionals in project and contract to hire positions. For a bit of background, council approved, these original contracts, at least with Scion, Viri, and Protingen on November 19th of 2019. There was a separate approval with Robert Half on August 6th of 2019. These contracts allowed for temporary IT professional services to be provided through December 31st of 2020. Each contract authorized extensions for successive 1-year terms through the execution of future contract amendments, like the ones that I'm presenting to you guys today. These amendments would extend services with these 4 agencies through December 31st, 2021. The city will continue to pay consultants based on time and materials for services provided through December 31st, 2021 in a total collective amount of $1.2 million. IT will, of course, monitor fees charged in relation to this collective budgeted amount to ensure amounts paid under all temporary consulting contracts do not exceed the collective amount, which council approved as part of the 2021 budget for IT capital projects. So with that, concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Brian? Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian, I get the consulting. I know how to work. I got a good understanding of it. So are these going to be ongoing consulting contract? I know we bring them in to kind of help bring in subject matter expert to do certain things for us. I do recall we doing Robert Half last year, and I'm okay with that. Just for long term, will this be like ongoing with the particular consulting?
That is correct. Yeah, we at least do have a plan to continue this through 2021, or at least the entire biennium through 2022, through some strategic planning that Mike Carrington and myself are doing. We do have about 45 IT capital projects planned for the next biennium. And based off some initial resource planning, these consultants will be providing for at least IT in the city to complete, augmented staff to complete and get through these capital projects.
And I appreciate it. And like I say, I'm more than okay with it, because I think, when the mayor and I came on, IT was just really holding together with bubble gum and duct tape, right? So, that's what happened, when we get so far behind, we have to make these investments. I think we all as council members have seen a rapid improvement in our IT service and capability. So I get it, I appreciate it. So thanks for your answer, sir.
You're welcome.
Very true, Councilmember Boyce. Anybody else have questions or comments? All right, so this is for the amendment to the consultant service staffing agreement. Is everyone okay moving this forward? All right, we will move that to the consent calendar. Thank you, Brian. Next up, we have Fifth Amendment to the agreement for indigent defense services, and welcome, Lori.
Good evening, everyone. As you know, we contract currently with Stuart McNichols Harmel. We contracted with them for public defense contracts beginning in 2015. And this year, the current amendment contract expires. So we're seeking a Fifth Amendment to both extend the current contract until the end of 2022 and to increase compensation. And the increase is $23,000 for next year and then an additional $24,470 in 2022. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Lori? All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So is everyone okay moving this forward to consent? All right, thank you, Lori. That was easy.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have, we are on to item O, which is the ordinance amending the KCC 1301 and 1401 building codes. So it looks like we've got a couple people presenting.
Good evening, Council. This is Matt Gilbert. I'm the Deputy Director of ECD. I'm subbing tonight for our building official, Steve Wilson, who needed to be away. And I'm joined by our Fire Marshal, John Napier. So we're here tonight to talk to you about the routine updates to the state building and fire codes that are due to take effect on February 1st. The State Building Code Council updates these every 3 years, and they go into effect statewide on a fairly regular schedule. The state does allow for local amendments, however. Mostly these affect how the code is administered and gives the local jurisdictions some additional control there. So we're here tonight to talk to you about those local amendments, and because most of them pertain to the fire code, John has agreed to handle the bulk of the description and the presentation here. I will note one thing before John gets started for housekeeping. In your packet, you'll see that we had originally scheduled this for action tonight, and there's a motion there. However, we're asking that we defer that motion to allow for some additional changes to the language that we will present to you on December 8th at the council meeting under other business. So for our purposes tonight, there'll be no need for a motion. So if that's okay with you, that's how we'd like to proceed. With that, I think John is prepared to walk through some of the proposed changes. So thank you, John.
Good evening, Council. This is John Napier, your Fire Marshal. As Matt had described, this is actually a very routine process that we go through. Most of the heavy lifting is done by the State Building Code Council in adopting the code statewide. So the state codes regulate construction and it ensures that we have health and safety and welfare of the occupants and the users of the buildings. We are required by state law to adopt the codes as the state building codes adopted them. And then we have the opportunity to amend those codes to make them fit as much as we can into our community. And that's done in Title 13 and Title 14 of Kent City Code. When we talk about the building codes, it's actually a whole bunch of codes. And so February 1st is the date that this goes live. When we talked about the State Building Code Act, we're actually talking about a series of documents. One's the International Building Code, which regulates commercial construction. Residential code is 1 and 2 family construction. Mechanical code is, all the mechanical devices from hot water tanks to fans to smoke dampers, all kinds of different types of equipment, HVAC units. The fire code, which is the access and water supply for the fire department operations, sprinklers, fire alarms, hazardous materials, and building regulations. Existing building code is another addition that we have that complements the International Building Code. And we have the Uniform Plumbing Code, and then lastly, we have the International Energy Conservation Code. And so all of those make up the State Building Code as adopted by the State Building Code Council. As Matt had stated, we typically are on a 3-year cycle, and the State Building Code Council was having some difficulties being able to process the sheer amount of changes amongst all those additions. So we initially delayed the annual, which was supposed to be in 2019. We moved it to July 2020. And then that thing called COVID happened. And so we were going to be bringing this proposal to you in the spring, but COVID happened. And so the State Building Code Council, with Governor Inslee's endorsement, moved the adoption to February 1st of 2021. Otherwise, we would be on a 3-year cycle. And so you can move to the next slide. So really a majority of this is a housekeeping issue, and trying to make the local, the codes fit to the local area. And so the first thing that we did that touches all the codes, and one of the reasons why we're delaying the adoption tonight is we're working on once and for all to get a standard permit expiration language that can fit in any of our codes. So there's just one shoe fits everything. And with that, we're changing things up a little bit. We know from the last 9 months of experience that we need to get some flexibility for the builders and for the homeowners that are trying to do work. And so traditionally, the ICC codes, the international codes, have had a 6-month requirement to commence work once you get your building permit. Well, we know life happens. And so we're recommending that we move it to a year. So we're going to give them more flexibility. We're also going to establish a 3-year deadline. And so normally things expire if you don't get started with 180 days, and then there's some other requirements. We're just going to try to keep it real clear for people to understand that they have 3 years to get their building constructed. We're also clarifying the when and how extensions will be granted. And then, as I said earlier, one of the key parts of this, and Steve Wilson, our building official, is really spearheading this, and I got to commend him for doing that. We're just trying to get consistent language across all the codes. And you would think that the code publisher, being the International Code Council, you would think they would have similar language amongst all the codes, but the way the codes are voted on and developed, they lack the ability to make sure that there's a consistent language. So we're going to try to get this right this time and try to make it consistent across all the codes. Next slide. There we go. So the fire code is the bulk of the changes. And the reason that is most of the building codes deal with the building itself. And there really isn't a good reason for Kent to make a change to something that's a nationwide code model. However, in the fire code, there's lots of opportunities to put a local flavor to it. So like, for instance, fire lanes, sprinkler thresholds, fire alarm thresholds, access requirements, water supply requirements, all of those types of issues are dealt with in the code adoption, and we're dealing with that at the local code amendment level. So a lot of it is housekeeping to align with the new code. When they publish code, they always want to make a change so they can sell a new book. Well, when they do that, they change numbers, and then that cascades through the document. We have to make some minor changes that go through. So we have some of that. We're clarifying some code provisions that we found over the last 4 years that we needed to spruce some things up so it's a little bit clearer. We're creating 2 new operational permits that help us regulate the fire protection system contractors and the hood and duct servicing contractors. And then lastly, which is a huge addition to our code, I think it's around 24 pages, we're working with Piecewicz, which is the new public radio system that's coming, and the local radio operators like Valleycom and all the county fire departments about getting a standard set of requirements that everybody can agree to for these new in-building radios that we're going to have to put in to transmit the signal inside the building. And it's really complicated. A lot of smart technical people have worked on it. And so we have a package inside this large amendment that really is just to address the regionalization of all the responding agencies, PCERN, and then the local radio operators. And that's the conclusion of the changes that we're proposing for 2018 code adoption. Do we have any questions?
Anybody have any questions on this? And we will see that presentation at council as well, or what those changes are in front of us.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Councilmember Fincher, did you have a question?
Thank you. Just one. So the changes for the regionalization, does that involve equipment changes?
Well,
across concern, it was the last one.
Yeah. So when the new radio system comes online, we currently have, I don't remember what the number is off the top of my head, but we have, 50 or 60 of these radio systems that retransmit the signal into the building because we have such energy efficient materials now. It really deadens the radio signals. So for firefighter and police safety, we retransmit those signals inside so they can talk to Valley Communications and to other units with their handheld devices. And so part of it is clarifying the requirements if they have to upgrade their systems. And the second part of it is just having a consistent testing and maintenance schedule and how that's to be conducted. So everybody's on the same page, so you can move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and feel that their units entering into a large building, like say the Amazon warehouse, everyone's got a consistent set of rules to make sure those systems are operating correctly and that we have full interoperability.
Okay, so no more old buildings in the basement and not being able to get a signal to get your...
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? All right, not seeing any, we will move this forward to other business. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the last item of our agenda this evening, information only, community development block grant coronavirus funds.
Madam Chair, that previous item, would it go to the other business or will we discuss that later? I wasn't too clear on that. Would it be on the next agenda for other business to discuss?
Yes, that's true, Derek. It will be on the council meeting other business instead of going to consent so that we have an opportunity to look at those changes.
Okay.
Correct. There's still a little more staff work, and so there may be some revisions to the ordinance, and so we weren't comfortable recommending that you move it directly to consent.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem. All right, so coronavirus funds block grant information.
Hi, this is Marina Hanson, Human Services Manager for the city, and I'm actually going to turn this over to Diane Wilson, our Senior CDBG Coordinator, but I wanted to get a super quick, sneaky update in just to thank you again for the other 2 funding opportunities that Human Services will have going forward. So I just wanted to make sure that you are all aware that we are in the process development stage for both the youth mental health funding as well as the opportunity funds. So staff has been doing some research and we just about have our process recommendation to bring forward for how we plan to release the youth mental health funds. We're just kind of trying to finish up a draft timeline there, but I just wanted to let you guys all know that we are actively working on that, even though that's not the topic for this evening. It's another human services fund that I know you're all keenly interested in. So with that, I will turn it over to Dinah.
Good evening, council members and everyone on the call, in the meeting. It's a pleasure to be here with you to update you on our Community Development Block Grant coronavirus grant. And as you will recall, these funds are through our CARES Act. I know that was mentioned earlier, CARES Act funds. And the first round of that, we received $670,541. And I'm happy to report that we have most of those contracts out and the work is being done. You have before you information on those grants. We funded 17 organizations, 8 of which were organizations that we have not previously funded through our Community Development Block Grant or our general fund grants. And so it was great to be able to really do a lot of outreach and get these funds out to organizations who normally have not applied for funds, to make sure that these funds are widely shared throughout our community. And a lot of these newer groups were groups that represent some of our smaller ethnic community-based organizations. So we have 17 contracts, as we said. 3 have not been signed as yet, and that is they're all in the routing, the digital routing pathway right now. And so we're just waiting for some of those parties to sign the contract. So we expect to get those done fairly quickly, doing a little bit of follow-up with people to remind them to send those contracts back to us. We also diverted some of our general, just regular CDBG funds. As you know, rental assistance is really essential for our community. And so we diverted $134,381 from our regular 2020 CDBG budget for one of our projects. But all told, these funds consist of about 36% of these funds are going to our rental and utility assistance. And some of the other areas that we funded are legal assistance to prevent eviction and to defend against eviction and respond to eviction. We also have funds for our personal equipment, the PPE equipment. And we also have funds for healthcare. So those are some of the areas. And food. Food was also, we received a lot of applications for food. So food has been very critical, along with the rental assistance. Someone wanted to know, I know one of the council members asked about oversight of these grants. We have to be carefully monitor these projects. We do that through quarterly reports. We also do it through desk monitoring and site visits, and that would be online site visits. In the climate we're in now, but we, as you probably know, get monitored pretty frequently by HUD. The years we don't get monitored, we have a big smile on our faces, because normally we do get funded. We do get monitored because we are one of the largest federal grants in the city. So we do monitor these grants to make sure that people understand, how to distribute the funds. And we also are having a technical assistance workshop next week for all of our grantees to just, answer any general questions they might have, to go over reporting with them. We've been answering questions throughout this process, as you might imagine. So we just wanted to have some specific time, and some of our grantees, we've never even met them. So this will give us a chance to meet them online as well. So does anyone have any questions before we move on to the round 3 funds that we will receive through the CDBG CV grant?
Thank you so much, Trina. And I'll let you continue in a minute. I just want to let council members know that in your packet on page 404 and 405, there is a list of some of these agencies and then the programs that they support, where this money has gone. So I know there was a question about that, and there is a list in there. So any other questions or comments about what we've seen so far before we move on?
Just a comment.
Yes, Councilmember Boyce.
Yeah, thank you. I know you got more to talk about, Diane. I think you must have the coolest job in the city, right? I mean, I think just to know that you are impacting people's life in such needy time, right? I mean, I just think that is such a huge reward, and that the city can play a major role in that, and you facilitating that. It got to be a very warm feeling to know that we're helping people out that are in desperate need. So I really just want to give you kudos and thanks for what you are doing and all the passion that you have with what you're doing. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Councilmember Corr, you also have your hand raised.
Thank you. Thank you, Dinah. And I echo Councilmember Boyce's voice here. You're doing a great job, and thank you for all the work you're doing. I think my question is answered. So that's round one. I think I was looking more for the next round of funding. That's what I was looking for. So thank you. I'll keep in, I guess I'll look for that when it comes. So thank you.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well.
Perfect. Go ahead and continue. Thank you.
Okay. For round 3, we will receive $859,720. So actually more than the first round. I think round 2 went to states. So this is the third round of funds. And from what we've heard from HUD, we will have similar regulations around this use of funds that were appropriate for the first round, so we don't expect any major changes. HUD trickles out of some of the regulations around some of the use of these funds, but what we've heard so far when we've met online with our HUD rep and with our national HUD office is that these rules will be similar. So we are in the midst of analyzing how we might use these funds. As you might recall, during the first process, it was somewhat long because we wanted to take applications. Some cities didn't do that, but we really didn't want to just pick organizations to give the money to based on who we knew, but we wanted to, give an opportunity for organizations to apply that were really in need and we might not otherwise know about. So, but this time we want to have a more truncated process. So, I think, what we'll probably do is look at some of the organizations that are getting the rental assistance, as we know that is, such still a great need and will be for the long term. And so if those organizations, do a very good job distributing those funds and we don't have any concerns around, the program and the way it's being run and the paperwork, which is quite a bit for CDBG, then we will see if they would like to takes on some additional funds for rental assistance. So I think that will be a big area that we probably will fund. And also we are looking at funding. I know employment is a big area, people who are underemployed and not employed. And so I think we will look at how we can get some funds out to those groups. You can provide financial assistance through these funds, but it has to be through a third party. So, for example, someone might be, may need childcare to go back to work, and we might look to providing a childcare grant. So we want to be as flexible as we can with the funds. So those are some of the areas, and we know that legal assistance, especially around eviction prevention, that is a big area. And I know also there was a really great article in the paper recently about a survey that was done regarding the needs for students in South King County and including Kent. And one of the things they mentioned was a need for tutors. That's a very area that can really be very inequitable, whereas, some parents can afford to have tutors for their kids, and low to moderate income families, which these grants support, they don't often have access to tutors. So if we can maybe get some money out to help kids stay on top of their studies, and we will look to the area as well. But we're definitely open if council members have other areas of suggestions for us.
Great job. Anybody have any questions or comments? Councilmember Larmer.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dina, for that detailed presentation and the work you're doing. Just echoing what my other council members have said, that it feels really nice that we're making sure our community is taken care of. One question that came to mind when you're talking about students. Are any of the organizations involved in internet access? I mean, you hear stories about like school districts are giving computers, but these kids don't have access to internet. And I know I've heard from teachers that some kids just aren't showing up in digital class. So,
yes, good question. Interestingly enough, we called that out in our first round, and we didn't get one application. So that surprised me.
Interesting.
We actually met with Comcast regarding this, and sent some information around about Comcast and whatnot. And we didn't get a single application. So we'd be happy to call that out again, because that was the area we really were interested in funding, because that seemed to be a really great need. I know that there's some other funds that are going out for digital access right now through the state, for example. That was really a priority area, and I know the state has also put a lot of funds into that, but that was subsequent to our application going out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you, Council President. Diane, is that information going out in multiple languages?
It is not. No, we have not put this out in multiple languages because of the quick turnaround. But yeah, that probably would get some more applications. A lot of our folks that we send it to, the organizations, they are bilingual, and so but yeah, that is a good point. We have not sent that out in multiple languages.
Okay, and what is the closing? When is the closing? We
have not opened. We're probably, like I said, not going to have an application for this third round. We're going to probably just put out a RFP or something of that nature, where folks can just, something easy, like maybe send us a concept paper, tell us what you want to use the funds for, just a few questions, I think our last application was 3 pages. So we want to try to do something that's about 1 page, where we can get the salient information that we need. And, we can do a follow-up over the phone or via the internet, via our Zoom, for any new organizations. But a lot of the organizations we will probably already be familiar with, because I anticipate we'll get a lot of folks back from the first round, and just organizations that we generally know. But anyone we don't know, we will reach out more to them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Kaur.
Thank you. Dinah, so you say you're not opening up the application process. So will you be just directly letting these organizations know that you have additional funding?
Yes, we'll put something on our internet. We'll send it through all our networks. We might even have a Zoom meeting for folks to have an opportunity to come in and hear about the funds. Similar to what we did previously, we attend a lot of meetings, and so we always make those announcements at those meetings. And so we'll spread this as widely as possible, and please help us get the news word out to folks about it, as much as possible.
And so, for example, Equity in Education is doing a lot of work in digital equity. So I don't think they were even part of this list. So I'm assuming somebody.
Oh, we got it out to them because we are on that meeting. We attend those partner in employment in what do they call it? Partners in
Change.
In change. It has been so long. Partners in Change meetings. So we did provide that for them, and I think at least one person from that group, when we had a call Zoom meeting regarding the grant funds, they were there. So we did get some applications from folks who attend that meeting, and I thought we would get one from Equity in Education, but they didn't apply. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
All right, any other questions or comments? Thank you so much, Dinah. Looking forward to seeing how these other funds get spent and continue to do that good work in our community. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll keep you updated. Thanks so much.
Thanks. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of a very long agenda this evening. So thank you to everyone that joined us. Thank you to my colleagues for all your thoughtful comments and questions. Stay safe, everyone. Take care. And we are adjourned.
Facilities that we have our stockpiles at. We have one on the East Hill at our Keyhawk Center.